Too Little Richard, Too Late is the 23rd episode of Season 7 of Full House. This is directed by John Tracy, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. It addresses some really important points. There are some really strong messages in this, and I'll talk about those in a moment. As a narrative, it's not the strongest. It was definitely just an opportunity for them to include Little Richard. And because I'm not really a Little Richard fan, I don't dislike Little Richard, I'm just not a fan. And that style of music isn't for me. I really didn't care. So I didn't find it to be very enjoyable. But if you're a Little Richard fan, you might enjoy it. But I also feel like the narrative could have been a bit stronger. The ending was really not great. And I'll talk about that in a moment when we get there. It starts off with Joey, Nicky and Alex playing with safety scissors, and Nicky and Alex are much better at using them than Joey. It was a nice way to start things off. And everything in the episode ties together really nicely. We first learn that Michelle's school is cutting the art program, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Jessie has managed to get tickets for the whole family to see Little Richard. They're very excited about this. And then when Jessie's back is turned, Nicky and Alex steal the tickets from his coat pocket and cut them up and use them to make a collage. And needless to say, Jessie is devastated. And I feel like he underreacted. I wasn't expecting him to completely flip out, but that's a big thing that Nicky and Alex have done. They've taken something that doesn't belong to them, and they've destroyed them, and they've ruined the experience for the whole family. Obviously, they don't realise that, but well, I'm surprised, but I'm not. It's not the first time we've seen Nicky and Alex do something naughty and not face any repercussions. We know this. It's not a new thing. But I do think Jessie underreacted to the situation. So I wasn't really believing that. It didn't feel very realistic to me. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Danny and Joey then go down to the PTA meeting to try and campaign for the arts program to get it back. And Joey gives this really great speech. It's an opportunity for him to do some cartoon impressions, which I always love. Dave Coulier's impersonations are just fabulous. And Joey's speech was just brilliant. And Mrs. Carruthers, played by the brilliant Marcia Wallace, is just by routine going to be president of the PTA meeting again, or the PTA. And Danny decides he's going to nominate Joey. And other people are happy with this. So now it's Joey running against Mrs. Carruthers for PTA president. And this is the overarching narrative, and it seems like Mrs. Carruthers really, really, really wants to win. But maybe Joey has an opportunity to win some votes. And this is because Denise's uncle is Little Richard. And we find this out because her uncle is picking her up from the tanner's house, and it's Little Richard. And I have to say, as I said, I don't really care about Little Richard. I'm indifferent. But I did love the moment where Little Richard just walks through the kitchen and Danny just kind of acknowledges him but doesn't at the same time. And it was just absolutely brilliant. I really thoroughly enjoyed that moment. And he agrees to perform at the PTA event, and then he's late, which isn't great. So we get a really beautiful performance from Danny, Joey, and Jessie. It was a really lovely moment, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. And then Stephanie, Michelle, and Denise do a dance, which is lovely. And then Derek sings, which is always wonderful. And then Kimmy and Becky and DJ are basically just stalling for time, doing goodness knows what. And then Little Richard arrives. And he does this performance, and in my opinion, the performance went on way longer than it needed to. It went on for quite a while. Maybe if I was a fan of that kind of music, I wouldn't be so bothered, but trying to judge it as objectively as possible, I think it went on a little bit longer than it needed to. I think they could have cut it a good few seconds before it actually finished, but we get this performance, and then it seems like Mrs. Carruthers is still going to win PTA president because Joey, by her explanation, is not actually a parent of a child at the school. Which was actually initially my first thought when Danny nominated him. I kind of thought, well, Joey's technically not the biological parent, and he's not legally, he hasn't adopted the children. He's not legally a guardian or parent, which obviously is not nice to hear, but it is the truth. And Mrs. Carruthers kind of had a valid point. It would depend on what's written in the PTA rulebook. But then Joey says, what exactly is a parent anyway? And I love this. There are two very valuable things about the episode. I don't think the narrative's that great. It was basically just to showcase Little Richard. That's the entire purpose of the episode. But I feel like there are two great things in this. The first is stressing the importance of art for school children, for anybody, but specifically for children at school, because the art program is often the first program to go when they need to make cutbacks, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And then the second important message is the fact that a parent can be so many things. It's not just the person who created the child biologically. And Joey gives this really great description of his role as a parent. And I genuinely got really emotional at it. It was really beautiful. And Full House often does this. It shows that there's no such thing as a typical family. And families come in all different shapes and sizes. And it's not the first time the show has done this. And whenever it does do this, it is so powerful. And Joey's speech, his second powerful speech of the episode, was just so wonderful and so moving. And Mrs. Carruthers said that she'd be happy for Joey to be her co-president, and they can work together to get the art program back. Joey accepts. End of episode. What a terrible, abrupt ending. Absolutely horrendous. It just ended so abruptly, and they wasted so much, well, maybe I shouldn't say wasted, but they spent so much time with just Little Richard performing, which again was kind of the point of the episode. I do believe they wrote the episode around Little Richard. That's just my opinion. But they could have saved some of that time, and we could have seen them getting the art program back. They could have really changed that and made it even more powerful. And they could have really shown that if parents work together and fight for what's right for their children, they can achieve great things like getting the art program reinstated. But they didn't show that, and we're kind of just left to assume that it's going to happen because Mrs. Carruthers and Joey will work well together, hopefully. So as a narrative, there are some important messages, but I feel like there was too much focus on Little Richard. And again, that's because I'm not that bothered. And I feel like the performance was taking up far too much time. The narrative could have been a lot stronger. It could have been a lot more impactful. So maybe they could have found another way to include Little Richard in a narrative. But I guess the arts aspect does kind of work. So in general, it's not the strongest episode. I feel like, in purely my opinion, they wrote the narrative around Little Richard rather than bringing Little Richard into an already well-crafted story. And it just doesn't work well. Or at least it doesn't work as well as it could have done. And of course, the ending was just so abrupt, really not very well done at all. So it's not the strongest episode. If you're a Little Richard fan, you might thoroughly enjoy it, but I still don't think that it's a strongly executed story as it could have been. So not the strongest episode, definitely not my favourite, but I can't deny the fact that there are some really important messages in here about the importance of the arts, and of course the fact that parents and families come in all different shapes and sizes, and I can't fault it for that. So the narrative wasn't the strongest, but those messages were delivered in ways, thanks to Joey, that were very clear, very strong, very powerful, and quite frankly, very moving. So I can't fault the episode for that, but I do feel like they took the wrong approach, or the focus was not on the right thing. But other than that, I guess it's safe to say that Too Little Richard, Too Late is still a solid episode of Full House.